Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. In my first video, I talked about the exposure triangle and how to take control of your camera. I talked about how to get it from the automatic settings and start to use the camera in its more control settings. So learning shutter speed, learning aperture, learning your ISO. So the next question I get from a lot of people who want to learn from me is, what lens should I buy? Because, as you start getting into it, you kind of figure things out. You're like, okay, what's next to buy? So most of the time when you get your kit, you get a zoom lens. This is a zoom lens right here. This is the 20-75 f2.8. This is the 35 millimeter 1.8. So I know a lot of you guys probably know, but for people who don't know, I'm gonna kind of explain the difference between the two. This is a zoom lens, so the focal length goes from 28 millimeters to 75. So if I turn this, I get closer to my subject without using my feet. So I'm going from 28 millimeters, I just went to 75 millimeters. If I turn it back, I'm going wide. So 28 millimeters means I can shoot, like, that's a great length if I'm taking a picture of, 5 or 6 people, or I'm doing a sunset. That's what 28 millimeters is good for. If I'm taking portraits of a person, I'm gonna go down to 75 millimeters, somewhere around there, and take pictures of a person. So that's what a zoom lens does. This is a prime lens. This is a 35 millimeter 1.8, and it's 35. What you see is what you get. So if I want to get closer, I can't zoom with this lens. I have to walk and take a picture of that person or that thing. And if I want to take a sunset and for whatever reason 35 millimeters isn't wide enough, I have to step back. So, to a lot of guys, they're probably hearing that and they're saying, well, why wouldn't I just use the zoom? The zoom is the better lens and is what comes with the camera. Well, that's not quite the case all the time. Don't sleep on the prime lenses, I tell you. The zooms are great. Zooms have come very far because they are shot, they're sharper than they've ever been. And generally speaking, they have not been as sharp as prime lenses. But there's a reason, I think, when you buy your first camera, you get a zoom lens and often not a prime lens in your box. And that's because historically this is sharper, and the prime lenses are generally 9 times out of 10 going to be better in low light. The aperture, maximum aperture for this lens is 1.8. Maximum aperture for this lens is 2.8. So when you put these together against each other in low light situations, this is going to be better. When I got my first camera, I got an 18-55 millimeter lens. That was the kit lens for my camera, and it was great. I used it, and it was, I had no complaints. I was out during the day. And then as I got more into photography, living in New York City, I always loved the subways. I love taking pictures of the subways. And I said, well, I want to shoot in the subway. And when I went with my 18-55, I found that I had to raise my ISO to a higher number because I didn't have the aperture that I needed. And it was disappointing because those images would often come out very grainy and the colors would be compromised, and it just wasn't worth even looking at some point. And when I shot, this is like in the early 2010s, so the editing that they have now wasn't quite what it was then. But the camera that I also had, it was a entry-level camera, so it wasn't really made for high ISO capability. So I ended up having to buy a prime lens that I can shoot in low light. I bought a 35 1.8, and that made my life a little bit better. So when I went into full frame, I got the zoom equivalent to the 18-55, which is a 24-70, and the aperture was 2.8, and that was good. I could actually go into the subways and take some shots at f2.8, because that's a lot better than an aperture of, let's say, 5.6 or 4.0. 2.8 is pretty good, especially with a full frame camera, because I have the ability to raise my ISO without compromising the picture. And it was good, but I still found myself wanting the 1.8 because also, if you watch my first video, aperture doesn't just control how much light, it also controls depth of field. And a 1.8 depth of field is gonna look a lot better when you're isolating a subject than a 2.8 is gonna look. And so once I started seeing that, you know, I found the primes to be very useful. So like I said, don't sleep on the primes. But what I will say for new photographers, new guys who are getting their cameras, stick to that zoom. Use that for a while. For example, Nikon has a great package. They have a 16 to 50. It's a Z50 camera. It comes with a 16 to 50 millimeter lens, and it comes with a 50 to 200 millimeter lens, or it might be 250, I'm not sure, but it's a package. You get both of those things, and it's about $1,250 American dollars. That's pretty good because you have a great focal length range from 50 millimeters, from 16 millimeters all the way up to 250 or 200 with two lenses. That's a lot you can work with. You might struggle at night, but it's not everyone who's trying to go out and take night pictures. A lot of people just like to shoot at the park or go to the zoo and take pictures of, you know, the animals, or just take pictures of their kids, you know, running in the park or whatever. That's a great package and you might use that. But if you're going to start getting into like more hobby, more enthusiast photography, and you want to start being able to take pictures whenever, you know, you can, indoor, outdoor, night, day, you want to start looking at the primes, because you're going to get that 1.8 aperture, and you got some lenses that shoot at a lower aperture, 1.4, 1.2. Nikon has a lens that its aperture is 0.95, which is, it's an incredible amount of light. It's also quite expensive, but that's, you know, a whole thing. So really quick, pros, like I said, of the zoom lens is you have more range with the focal length. That allows you to do less moving. But with the negatives is that you could struggle in low light with some of the lenses. And they're also generally, zoom lenses are more expensive. This is a 28 to 75 Nikkor. This is about $1,000. They have a 24-70 2.8, which is their S line, which is a very sharp professional style lens. That lens is $2,000. Zoom lenses with an aperture of 2.8 and less tend to be less aperture, like 2.0. They tend to be very expensive. Canon has a 28 to 70, I believe it is, and I'm not sure because I don't shoot Canon, so I don't know all the lenses, but I do know they have a 28 to 70, which is a great lens. It's a f2.0. That's a very low aperture. It takes a lot of light in. That lens is about $3,000. So zoom lenses do tend to be more expensive and heavier, and that could be a con for you, a negative. Primes, the advantage that it gives up in having less range, you get in its low light capability, generally speaking. Again, general, not every lens, but they are generally cheaper than zooms, and they're also generally sharper. Not always the case, but generally they're sharper, and so that, you know, they have their perks for that. Oh, and they're also lighter in weight. Yeah, they're generally lighter. Prime lenses are lighter. You put 2 of those or 3 of those in your bag compared to 2 or 3 zooms. At one time I had what they call the portrait trinity, well, not the portrait, the zoom trinity. I had a 14 to 24, a 24-70, and a 70 to 200. That covers the focal length of what a professional photographer would use for 14 millimeters to 200 millimeters. It's great. But sticking those 3 things in my bag with my camera is a lot on your back. I could use a 35, a 50, and an 85 millimeter to go on a portrait session, and it's a lot lighter. And I'm going to be able to shoot in lower light, and I'm going to get, you know, very sharp pictures. With those 3 lenses that I mentioned in that trinity, I'm not going to say they're sharper, that this is sharper than that. Those lenses are very sharp, and they're also very expensive. So you kind of have to decide. And when I tell you things, I tell you from my experience, not, you know, it's not right or wrong. You kind of have to figure that out for yourself as you take pictures. So what I will say, keep your zoom kit that you might get. 9 times out of 10, if you're getting a new camera and you're just starting, you're going to get a zoom lens. Use that lens. learn it, master it, figure out what focal lengths you like, if you like shooting portraits or you like shooting landscapes. And then from there, you could kind of make a decision on what you want to buy next, and you do your research on your lenses and figure out what's going to be good. If you like portraits, I find for me, the primes work better. I like the way prime lenses look when I'm taking portraits. And if I'm doing landscapes, I actually use primes for landscapes too. But you could find that the zooms are going to be a little bit better, because if you're doing like, you're hiking and you want to be able to take a variety of shots and you only want to carry one lens, the zoom might be for you. So like I said, you kind of have to figure that out. But if you find that you like macro photography, you're probably going to get a prime macro lens. They have a different variety of macro lenses that are in the prime range. So you have some that are 50mm macros, you have some that are 100mm macros. I don't think they have a zoom that is a macro zoom. I'm not sure, but I don't think they do. So, like I said, you just have to kind of figure that out as you go on to your photography and you get your experience, what's gonna kind of work for you. So that's my take on it, and that's kind of it. I will say this lastly about my experience. When I started photography, like I said, I had a zoom and then I went over to the primes. Today, you see I have both. There's a reason I have both, because I still do use both. Particularly with weddings, when I'm shooting a ceremony, I will use the zoom. And this is important to know, especially even when you get into your professional level. When you're at a wedding, you're in a ceremony, you can't really run around too much because you don't want to get in the way of the guest. If you're not, well, in my case, if I'm not having my videographer, I'm not doing the video myself, I can't get in the way of that videographer who might be shooting that wedding from a video standpoint. So I kind of try to stay stationary to let everyone enjoy the ceremony. And so that's where the zooms come in handy, because a 70-200, I can kind of stay close right to the bride and groom when they do their first kiss and they say their I do's without actually having to move. If I'm using a prime like a 50, it's going to be a problem. I'm going to have to probably use my feet to get closer, and now I'm getting in the way of potentially the guest or whatever. So zooms do come in handy. I do like primes better, but I don't want to sell out the zoom. The zooms still come in handy even today. So like I said, I'm showing you a zoom. It's in my, in my kit. I have it. And I actually have a couple of zooms. So that's my take on it. I'd love to kind of get a discussion going on what you guys might think. We can talk about it. I will respond to any comments I get. And we can have the discussion and see, because there are a lot of professionals who do use zooms, and then there's a lot of professionals who use the prime. So let's talk about it, man. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys. Take care, like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Peace.